In this video we're going to be focusing on Coppicing Willow. It's a short rotation willow coppice that we have, and it's a follow-up to a question I had on my hazel coppicing video. So willow is also a native tree that coppices readily. It has a multi-stemmed growth form in its natural state, so when it's coppiced it naturally produces multiple stems. And there are a variety of different willows that are native to Europe, I think almost 150 possibly, but there's a few common ones within the UK, and they all coppice quite well. Now it's important to understand which willow you have and what you're trying to achieve with it, because the product may vary depending on the species of willow. For example, the osier willow they often use for basket making, hamper making. You have a willow that is specific for cricket bats, and then some people use willow for firewood. So different varieties are better suited for different products. So this coppice area we established around 10 years ago, and we had three key aims for this coppice. One was windbreak, we had habitat creation, and the third one was to create a useful product. So this first section on this side is actually a hybrid willow, so it's fast growing, and we were trialing it out as a good solid windbreak. This area behind me now is actually the goat willow, and that was also planted at the same time, but it has a very different growth form. It's much lower to the ground, but it actually creates a denser habitat and also better windbreak. So as you can see, they were planted at the same time, but they're both growing in a very different way and are providing different benefits. Now typically short rotation coppice on a commercial scale is actually done in a whole section, which is often termed a cant or a coupe, and really that can be on a 5-year rotation, so you'd have 5 sections that you would coppice all. So the one section is done together, and that allows you to each year do a different section. Now we've taken a different approach here because we were trying to create a windbreak as well as we were managing it for wildlife. So we're actually taking out individual trees each year. It's a very small scale coppice, but hopefully it helps to illustrate that they don't need to be big complex commercial entities. You can do them on a small scale too. So all these trees were planted at the same time. This one has not been coppiced yet. You can see it hasn't got too many stems, however it is still producing multiple stems naturally. Now this tree next door was coppiced a few years ago, and you can see the multiple stem that have regrown from the stool. Now there's actually a variety of thicknesses here. Most likely somewhere from the first year's growth, and then other stems have grown on subsequently. What this does provide you, if you do want to coppice it later, is different thickness stems that you can use for different products. However, if you're managing for something like firewood, you would need to thin it out and try and create some leaders that thicken up more for firewood. Yeah, so this is a year old, and you can see the regrowth from the buds that then are dormant in the cambium layer. They spring up and create the new growth, and these are all 1 year old. So in terms of when the best time is to do the coppice, it generally is the dormant season. If you've seen my other video on hazel, I went into a bit more detail on that, but the dormant time is when the tree has pulled all its resources down into its roots, and it's a good time to do coppicing. There's less foliage, less impact on the wildlife, and less impact on the tree. Now in this case we tend to do it in late winter rather than early. We're in a very wet part of the country, and the earlier you do it, the more it's exposed to very wet winters and can lead to infection, etc. So we tend to do it in late winter, but you don't want to leave it too late, because particularly willow, it buds very early and you don't really want to disrupt its growing season too much. So the best recommendation is in winter, and depending on your site, early or late winter. So for today I'll show you how I coppice this tree. This one hasn't been coppiced before, but you can see the original main stem, and then subsequent years they've actually sent up other shoots. So once again showing the multi-stemmed growth form that willow love to produce. You don't need industrial tools like chainsaws. If you're doing it on a bigger scale, then clearly they are useful, but if you're just doing it on a small holding, small scale, this will be easily managed with some secateurs or loppers and a pruning saw to take down the main trunk. So I've just cleaned up the stem a little bit just to make it easier to fell it. Now if it's a small tree, you can just use a small pruning saw, but in this case I'm just going to go with a small bow saw instead. So I'm going to fell it now and then I'll clean the stump up. I want to keep it quite low because obviously the higher you are, subsequent cuts bring it up a bit. So I'm going to take it down quite low to the ground and we'll do that felling cut now. So it's important that your cut is clean, and in this case I'm angling it slightly down so the water will be shed, and it's facing south so that it gets sun on it. So all of this is to try and prevent any sort of infection or mold growth. So I'm also cleaning the leaf litter away from the stump or the stool, so that when the spring comes it's fully invigorated and can just grow freely from the stump. So one of the products of willow coppice, obviously you get these nice thin stems. You can use them for a variety of products. If you saw my wreath making video from Christmas, you know, you can use this sort of thickness for making wreaths or whatever you want to do. But another very useful thing to do for re-establishing a new coppice is to use these as whips. You literally just push them into the ground, trim them off, and you can start growing the next generation of trees. Now that was our original line of trees we planted, but this one here was actually a whip that we pruned off quite early on, just shoved in the ground, and we're expanding the coppice this way, and it's not costing us anything. It's just a result of our pruning our whips from the felled trees. So when you're preparing your whip, you're going to clean it up and make your cuts nice and clean, also angled, and likewise on the bottom. So what is important when you plant these whips out is to make sure you have the buds facing up. If you plant the whip upside down, it won't grow, it will die. So if you put this down on the ground and pick it up, make sure the buds are facing up before you push into the ground. Okay, so it's time to clean up the trunk and produce the product that you've created from your coppice. And in this case we've got a main leader which can be used for some firewood, but we've also got these smaller branches which we can use for whips or for kindling, or also for, you know, willow basket making, etc. So I'm going to clean it up with, you know, a cutting tool like a bull hook. You can also use loppers, whatever you have to hand. So we've just been processing some of the wood from this tree we've just coppiced, and, you know, got some wood for firewood, larger stems, some smaller bits for kindling, and we've also created some whips that we can use to plant new trees for additional coppice. So that's it for this week. So hopefully those of you who are interested in coppicing found this of use. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.